Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. As you can tell by the title, today marks my 4-year sobriety date. I am 4 years clean from drugs and alcohol. Every year on my sobriety date, I like to just kind of share my story, share how far I've come. This year I wanted to do something a little bit different. So if you'd like a chronological order of my addiction struggle story, I'm gonna link that down below. On Instagram this week, I opened up a Q&A for you guys to kind of drop your Q&A questions about sobriety, about my sobriety, things like that. I just wanted to cover all of those, and I just kind of wanted to give you guys advice that you're requesting or answer any questions you might have. But just to give you the Cliff Notes version, I was an avid user of alcohol since I was probably 15 or 16, and that quickly snowballed later in my life to all kinds of drugs. And I think one of the number one questions that I get asked a lot was, what drugs was I using? And it was primarily cocaine, but I was using psychedelics, Molly as often as I could. Definitely have some little holes in the noggin there. And I've heard this a lot for people in recovery with alcohol and drugs, but my memory is so bad. I call it goldfish brain. I can't remember names. I can't remember things. I can't remember something that somebody said to me 2 minutes ago. It's something that I struggle with a lot, and I think in the beginning of my sobriety, it was way worse, and it scared me a lot. Obviously, I think taking Molly and things like that often, definitely not good for your brain. I'm case in point of that. And I think that, when I go to share all of this on the internet, the internet is forever. Yeah, I know that. I don't know if you saw the meme that's been going around of me, but I share my story very openly on the internet because at the beginning of my sobriety, I felt really alone. I felt like I was going to be isolated. I didn't get along with any of my peers because we no longer shared the same interests. I felt like I wasn't going to be social again. I was never going to date again. I was never going to have any friends ever again. I was never going to be able to be out in public without feeling socially awkward and quiet and that everybody was staring at me. And because I felt like that, and I also felt like I was literally the only person on earth feeling like that and experiencing that, I would take to the internet and watch people who were sharing their sobriety journey, sharing how far they came, all the things that they were experiencing, because it made me feel less alone. And so if I could just kind of give support to one other person who is feeling really isolated and alone, then I feel good, because that was me one day, and I was literally scouring the internet for just somebody that I could connect to that was going through the same thing as me. And so I think it's really important to share my sobriety story, share that there is success on the other side of it, and also share that you can have a fun and social life once you do the adequate healing that it takes to kind of build up that strength, build up that stability for you to kind of release yourself into the world again, if that makes sense. So let's jump into the questions. I'm gonna just read them off of my phone. So there are a lot on here about California sober. I think that if I were a person who enjoyed smoking weed, that I probably would. But to be completely honest, weed makes me scared and has always made me scared. So I don't like it. The other thing too is I don't think that alcohol and drugs are the devil. And a lot of the people that I love very much love drugs and alcohol, and that doesn't make me villainize them or think that I'm better than them. I just think that I am not a person who can take those things in a normal capacity and be okay. It was ruining my life. Just because it's ruining my life doesn't mean that it's ruining everybody else's life, and I need to judge everybody who is going out on the weekends, going to bars, because honestly, they're having fun, they're living their life. I just have to have fun and live my life in a separate way that's healthy for me now, Because if I could go out on the weekend with my friends and just enjoy a couple beers and dance and be fun and not hate myself, hate my life, destroy everything, spend all my money, wreck my car, all those things, then I would probably do it. But I can't, so I don't. This one here says, have you had any moments of weakness in these past 4 years? So I recently stepped back into the festival scene, and this is not a moment of weakness. This is a moment of strength, which I feel like I should share first. So I stepped back into the festival scene. I went to Lightning in a Bottle back in May, and it was incredible. I had a great experience. I was offered drugs one time by someone that I did not know. Every other person in our friend group did not offer me anything, did not offer me a drink, nothing. I think It's really important to surround yourself with people that are on board with your decision to stay sober. I've mentioned this before. I think that if someone is pressuring you to drink or to do drugs or whatever when you're trying to be sober, they are not your friend. They're not. That might be a really tough pill to swallow, but the reality of it is they're not respecting a boundary that is like a really big boundary. So anyway, I was offered drugs at the music festival one time by a stranger. I obviously said no, and that was it. Like, I didn't even hesitate. I didn't even care, honestly. It was like nothing. I do feel like I'm a lot more stable in my ability to say no, but I do not put myself in situations where there would be a lot of people pressuring me to. Like, if I'm going to a bar, I'm not going by myself and talking to strangers who are going to be like offering to buy me drinks left and right. If I'm going out with like a huge group of friends, and every single one of them knows that I don't drink, and none of them offer me a drink. Like, I literally just went out last weekend. We went to 2 clubs. I had so much fun. Nobody offered me a drink. They all brought me a Sprite when everybody got a round of drinks. Like, that's so sweet. That's so sweet. Those are good friends. You need good friends. I will say that in the last year, I had something in my personal life that drugs were not presented to me, but I discovered them. And that was harder for me to turn down. I still did it, and it was actually like a moment that I was very proud of myself. It was a moment where I stumbled across these drugs and no one was around, and I was like, I could do this and no one would even know. And I had that thought, and that's when I was like, okay. And so I got rid of it and had to really reevaluate my relationship with this person and whether or not my boundaries were being crossed. I felt really upset that those substances were left in my space, like knowing my history, like this person and I were very close. And so that was kind of like a reevaluating moment. I would say that that is probably the closest I've come to relapsing. And again, it wasn't something that I was seeking out. It was very like opportunistic, but I was strong enough to say no. So I'm super proud of that. I think that it's those moments that you can't plan for that end up being the most difficult. And I share this not to villainize this person, but I share it because like some things are out of your control. Like, I don't know what that situation would have looked like had I been in it a year into my sobriety. Like, here I am 4 years later, and I have a solid foundation, and I'm able to say no, and I'm able to go out, and I've kind of like, become very secure in the fact that like I don't need drugs and alcohol. And then all of a sudden I'm left alone in a room and I have to decide for myself. It's not like someone's offering and I'm just like able to say no. It's like if you've watched those like TikToks of the little kid with like the cupcake and they're like, okay, don't touch that till mommy gets back, and you have like the camera on them and you watch them like stick their finger in it and like lick it. That's like literally how I felt. And it was really hard. But again, the moment that it was gone and I had like gotten rid of it, I felt a lot better, and that pressure was off, and then it was just kind of replaced with like pain of betrayal almost, of this person not respecting my boundaries. But that's literally been the only instance in 4 years. The only instance. A lot of the other questions on here pertain to like my grief that I've been going through since like losing Yeti, going through a breakup recently. And I think a lot of people are curious because I think that what a lot of people expect is when something bad happens that you want to like turn to drugs and alcohol. And I do think that that definitely is me. Like, that trigger is still very much there. And I was nervous as to how I was going to respond to these things too. Like, I really was. But the fact of the matter is like, I have a great support network of therapists, of friends, of family, and people that I can call in those moments where, I'm stressed out. It's not like, oh, I'm stressed out, I'm going to drink. I don't let it get to that point. I've been managing it. I really haven't been craving alcohol. I haven't been like, oh, I need a drink. I haven't had like a spiral of a day. I think because I'm so used to not having that alcohol crutch that it's just kind of not an option in my head anymore, if that makes sense. So it's not the first thing that I think about now. And there are certain things that trigger it, but confusingly enough, my breakup and the death of my dog did not trigger that. Are you able to be around drunk people sober? I find that very difficult. So sometimes this can be a trigger for me, and I've had this be a trigger for me in the past, and it's actually not a trigger that makes me want to drink. I also get panic attacks, and it will give me a panic attack. I don't know if it's because I'm so scared that, you know, I'm going to want to drink or whatever. I'm not really sure what causes it, but if I'm going out with my friends and it gets past a certain hour and I'm tired and I decide I need to go and nobody wants to leave, and then I've been there a lot longer than I want to be because we're all driving home and everybody's really drunk, like, that will kind of start to give me a little case of the panics. I've recently discovered that if I stay up till like 2 a.m. with all my friends when they're going out, I get the Sunday scaries the next day, like really bad. Like I will literally spiral as if I had had a drink. I think it's like a lack of sleep thing for me. I've also discovered that like getting a regular sleep schedule and not staying up for days on end like I used to do really has helped me just like be a calm person. Drunk strangers do bother me. Drunk men bother me. Like the kind of guy who's like gripping on your shoulder, trying to talk to you, like that will really stress me out. But I also have like a lot of fear around strange men. So I don't necessarily know if that's like a sobriety thing or a woman thing, trauma thing, what have you. Drunk men will annoy me that I don't know. Any of my friends that are drunk, and they're like having a good time, I'm like cheering them on. Like I'm like, I love it. I think it's so fun to watch everybody like dance around, be a little silly, have a good time. Again, like I don't hold any judgment towards people that drink alcohol. It's just not something that's like good for me. And I still now like to be part of the party, but the first like 3 years of my sobriety did not look like that. Like I did not go in a bar till I was 1 year sober. This sounds counterproductive. I celebrated my 1 year sobriety with my friend Alana and my friend Michaela, and we went out to a bunch of bars in Mammoth, California, and I got a stick and poke tattoo, and I got a Shirley Temple, and we just kind of like hung out and had fun. And it's funny because I think like maybe it's working in the nightlife scene for so long, and maybe it's from basing my personality off of going out and partying all the time for so long, but there's something real homey about a dive bar to me. Like, I love a dive bar. Again, this isn't like a how-to of how to get sober. I feel like this might be counterproductive to somebody who is looking for sobriety tips. I think that my first video really will give you a better like system on how to stay sober. I also have a From the Heart Space video on like sobriety that I do find is really, really helpful. This is just kind of like little small things that I'm dealing with now, 4 years into my journey, and kind of how I approach life as a sober person now. How did you build back your confidence in social situations without alcohol and substances? So this is tricky. I am a social anxiety girly, and I still get it depending on like the situation. Sometimes I'm fine. Like if it's a group of my friends, I'm so fine. But the second I'm interacting with new people, I find myself literally like, I will not have a voice. I will go absolutely mute. Like if somebody asks me a question, I'm like, In the beginning, I would have panic attacks like in the grocery store. I've talked about this like at length in some of my other videos, but I literally would not be able to be in line at the cashier at the grocery store with my mom. Like there were multiple occasions when I would have to like go sit in the car because I felt like everybody was staring at me. And I truly think that that comes from learning how to socialize at a young age, only drunk. So anytime I was around a group of friends, I was drunk, you know, and I'd never been to a party sober. I'd never been to like a dinner sober. That just like wasn't something that I had ever experienced before. So it really is like, you're like a baby and you're learning how to do everything for the first time. And everything for the first time is really, really scary. And you have to just keep practicing. And sometimes, like me at the grocery store, you're going to have to bail and go sit in the car and regroup. But eventually you'll be able to break through and have like one checkout where you don't have to do that. And after that, like you do that 4 or 5 more times and you've adjusted. And the next thing you know, like I love grocery shopping now. Grocery shopping is so cathartic for me. And it's so funny just to see how like polar opposite I felt about a grocery shopping experience at the beginning of my sobriety versus the end of my sobriety. Like now, if there's a grocery outlet, I'm going in it because it is the most relaxing experience to me to just go up and down the aisles and peruse all the different random things that they have in there. So that in itself is a win, you know? To build confidence in social situations, you have to just like keep doing it, but you have to build it up. So you can't start by like going to a club. If that's gonna freak you out, don't go to a club. Don't go to a club. Hang out with 4 friends in a park. Hang out with 4 friends at a restaurant. Hang out with 4 friends, I don't know, at the mall. Don't put yourself in situations that you're going to get really stressed out, because then you're going to want to drink or you're going to want to use drugs, whatever your substance is. Don't put yourself way over threshold. Work within your threshold and build up that stability. That's the most important thing. Like, until you have a solid foundation of sobriety, you're not going to be able to handle like all the things that you used to do in your old life. And you can't expect yourself to, you know? How has sobriety helped your relationship with your family? So I've talked about this before, but obviously my mom was like a big help during my sobriety. She pretty much did everything. Like, I literally lived at her house, moved into her basement, stayed there, because when I got sober, it was during COVID. So I literally moved out of my apartment in Oregon, and my mom came and drove me home with all of my stuff packed into my Corolla. And as we were driving across the country to New Hampshire, everything was shutting down with the first cases of COVID. So what was interesting was I couldn't go out to bars. I couldn't see any friends. I couldn't do anything. So I was kind of like, in a weird way, trapped in her house. And I didn't get sober for a couple months after I moved in with her, because sometimes that's just like not how that works, you know? And she wasn't forcing me not to drink. I think she just knew that things were getting really bad. My mental health was like deteriorating, and I was no longer safe living on my own and could no longer take care of myself, wasn't paying my bills, like wasn't doing basic human things that you need to do to like be an adult and live on your own. I wasn't doing any of that, and she knew it. So she threw me a life vest and said, all right, you gotta move home. And I was like, yeah, okay. So she moved me home, and I've always been really close with my mom, but I do think that living with her for my first year of sobriety really like made us even closer. And I think that in the first couple months of me getting sober, I, again, was like struggling with severe mental health things, and severe anxiety. And she really helped talk me through that and sat with me and just kind of like made me feel like I wasn't by myself. And since I got sober, my relationship with my sister and my dad has like drastically improved, just because I feel like I have a better head on my shoulders. So I'm not reactive. I'm not looking for a fight. I'm not like doing crazy shit that's making other people upset at like vacations and holidays and things like that. I really feel like I got a new lease on life, and I feel like I am so more interested in like having a good relationship with everyone in my family and getting to know everyone in my family. Like, my grandparents are so important to me, and it's like really important that I have a relationship with them. Whereas when I was using, I would just kind of drop off the face of the earth for forever and just be drinking and not care about anything else other than like, you know, the next party I was going to, things like that. So I just feel like I'm able to have healthier relationships with my family members, which is amazing, because the thing that you want when you're getting sober is a good support network. And so by like fostering these relationships with your family members, you're getting a better support network. So it's like a nice little amp up cycle. A lot of questions on here just asking like what made me get sober. And I think that like what a lot of people want is like a big like dark night of the soul experience. And to be honest, I think that I was just like pedaling rock bottom for so many months. Like I said, I think I moved home in February, March, April, May, June, July. So I lived at my mom's house for 5 months before getting sober. And like in the last couple months living at her house, I like came home with a bloody nose because I had like fallen down and smashed my face on a rock. Felt sick literally all the time because I was just like drinking an entire case of White Claw like every day. I had no job. I had no money. Again, that could have been COVID too, but probably not. I just like had zero direction. And obviously my sobriety date is the 5th of July. So the last day that I ever had a drink in my entire life was the 4th of July, 2020. And, you know, it was a big like day for me, I guess. I you know, I think when I woke up the next day out of my hangover, all I really realized was that the people that I was surrounding myself with didn't give a shit about me, and we didn't have as much in common as I thought. I didn't have any direction in life. I didn't have any hobbies outside of drinking. That was the biggest thing. Like, I remember my mom being like, well, what do you like to do? Because I was like, I don't have any friends. And she was like, well, find friends that like to do the same thing as you. And I was like, I don't like to do anything except for get drunk. So that was like a big wake-up call to me. I also was experiencing, I don't know if this is just something that happens when you get older or when it's like the serotonin has been completely depleted from your brain, but I found that when I would wake up every morning, I would have like anxiety and like thoughts about, you know, self-harm and things like that I had never experienced before in my life. And those were becoming like everyday thoughts. So I kind of knew that I just like needed to cut alcohol out of my life. Prior to like this sobriety journey that I have been on, the longest I had been sober for, I had tried to go sober completely while I was still living in Oregon and working in the club. And I managed to do 100 days, which I actually, looking back, I don't know how it was even possible to stay sober working at a strip club. You know, I would carry around a champagne glass and the bartenders would fill it with ginger ale so it would look like I had champagne in there so people wouldn't offer me drinks. And I did it. And then all that it took was like, I think I had a fight with my boyfriend at the time and it all came crashing back down and I just started drinking all over again. But in between there, I don't think I ever tried to get sober. Like, I didn't even try to go sober for like a weekend or anything like that. So I don't really know. I think it was just perfect storm of me having like my support network, of us like literally being isolated because of the pandemic. Then, you know, it was literally just me and my mom for forever. So I didn't have any friends to hang out with. All of my friends that I have now, I've had since I was in college, and they are like my cheerleaders. Like, they're so happy that I'm sober and I am so grateful for them every single day. But I really had to cut out everybody in my life that like wasn't on board with the sober train. You know what I mean? And like cut out people that were just around me because, you know, it was fun to party and like have fun and hang out. And when I realized that there weren't really deep, meaningful friendships happening there, it was really painful because some of the people that I stopped talking to, I had been friends with since I was in high school. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying that it's really difficult to keep people who are not aligned with your new values of wanting to get sober. And I say that with love, but there's a lot of things in your life that have to change in order for you to maintain sobriety. And it's definitely not the easiest path. It's a really difficult path, but it's worth it in the end for the life that you want, if that makes sense. It's like that whole saying, like, your new life is going to cost you the old one. That's literally case in point what happened with me here. Where to hang out that isn't a bar or a coffee shop. So this ties into, I got a lot of questions about dating. And I do want to talk about this because, you know, obviously the only person that I've dated sober is Cap. So we'll talk about Cap, even though we just broke up. I was literally completely off of dating anybody for almost 2 years. Completely. Because I had like social anxiety, I didn't have any desire to date anybody. I really I was not on dating apps. I wasn't doing any of that. And if you, like, when people asked me, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to be by myself for forever. And I wasn't even pissed about it. Like, I was just like, I have zero desire to date or share myself with anybody because I'm too anxious, too nervous. I really felt like that until, you know, Cap and I had known each other for like 10 years and he kind of just weaseled his way in and was very respectful and kind and supportive, and that's how we started dating. Like, I was not looking to date anybody, and for a while I didn't even want to date him. You know, he was just very persistent and very sweet, and so it ended up just working out. But even now that we've broken up, I don't trust anybody is the number one thing. I have a lot of issues around men, which, you know, I don't know if that has to do with a lot of why I would drink on dates. Like, if you ever dated me, took me for a date when we lived in Eugene, I am so sorry, because like, I was a train wreck. Now it's kind of like, I'm very picky about the people that I allow into my social circle, into my life, and I'm really not super interested in dating. But I will say that when Cap and I first started dating, our first date was at a coffee shop. And I know that this person said like not bars, not coffee shop. Coffee shop is so easy for a first date because you can keep it short and sweet. So if you don't like them, you never have to see them again. And if you do like them, you can do something else. And something else can look like, you know, going to like your favorite thrift stores in town. Walks are always really great, especially if like either one of you has like dogs or you both have dogs. That's so cute. But like, go for a walk, because walks are great. You can talk. You're not just like staring at each other face to face. Because if you ask Cap, on our first date, I like obliterated a straw wrapper into like microscopic pieces, like to the point where I had like torn the straw wrapper off, and I was just like so nervous and didn't know what to do that I was just like ripping it into the tiniest pieces over and over and over again, until he was like, "Are you okay? Like, are you okay?" And I was like, you know, no, I can't seem to make eye contact. And you know, I kind of got over that as time went on, and like, you know, you build that trust. But he was good vibes on the first date, so he passed and he got a second date. But like, there's nothing wrong with coffee shop dates, I think. But if you don't like that, you can go to museums. Like, if you're both into art, I love that. You could do like things like, I think Airbnb has like on the activities list, like in your city, like some people will teach like little cooking classes and stuff like that, like at their house. You could do that. I don't know. The possibilities are endless. I think that right now, like, especially with younger people, there's so much that goes into like drinking culture and things like that. So I would just say, like, I would avoid night dates. Like, I want a day date. Personally, I think that that's just like better vibes when you're sober. I don't know. That's just my opinion. I don't necessarily know if I have like, I could do a whole other video on dating sober if you guys are really interested in that. But I myself am not looking to date right now. So I feel like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if he's mean, tell him to fuck off. But like, I don't want to say that, you know? How did you heal your memories of past traumas, or at least make them feel not as heavy? So this is something that I continue to do every single day. Like, I did it this morning on my therapy call with my therapist. And I think that especially when you're dealing with trauma, you really need to get a trauma-informed therapist. And I know that that's not always like super attainable financially to people, but I know that there's better help online, and I've used that before. I've had good and bad experiences with that, but honestly, talking to someone who is specialized with addiction issues and trauma-informed is so helpful in a way that, like, I can't talk you through your trauma. You really need someone specialized. I think that especially when you're unpacking all of these emotions that you have never been able to feel because you've been numbing them with substances, it's really important to get a therapist to help kind of walk you through how to safely feel those emotions without relapsing, or to safely and healthily deal with them. I really think therapy is a great thing. I think that everybody should have a therapist, somebody who's not like, you know, their mom or their friend to kind of bounce ideas off of. So my recommendation is, if you can't afford it, definitely get a therapist, because they can give you better advice than I can on any of this. Any tips for sobriety after some time? I have a little over a year and I worry about taking it for granted. This is really interesting because I think that, you know, I'm a huge fan of journaling. I think that journaling is the best thing we can do to help process things, but also to notice what we're grateful for in our life. I find that I will go weeks without thinking like, oh my God, I'm so happy that my life is so much better now that I'm sober. I will go weeks without thinking that. And then one day I'll like remember that. When you think back on all of the bad times, like I think back to having a panic attack in the grocery store. And then, you know, I'll do a journal entry about just like the reflection we talked about in the beginning of this video. Like, talk about how I love the grocery store now. And I never thought that would happen. And isn't it amazing, like, how far I've come? And just showing appreciation for your growth and recognizing your own growth. You know, like, say you go on your first date and you don't have a drink. That's amazing, you know? Or start a new hobby. You join a yoga studio and you're starting all these new hobbies and you're like, wow, I have real hobbies now and I never had hobbies or interests before. I have all these friends that, you know, I never had before because all we did was drink and party. If you reflect on that, like, gratitude multiplies. And if you show gratitude, like, it's kind of like showing love for yourself. And it's a very common theme for me to say love is expansive. Like, there's so much growth to do when you love yourself. Showing yourself appreciation, showing yourself self-love by recognizing all these things that you've accomplished. I always like say it's like being a baby. When you're first getting sober, it's like being a baby. When you're a baby and you take your first step, mom and dad are like, yay, like, oh my God, clapping and cheering you on. Okay, well, when I'm a grown-up now and I stand up and step out of bed in the morning, nobody cheers and claps for me. But, and this could just be delusion, what you should be doing is getting up out of bed and being like, wow, I didn't sleep till 3 p.m. today because I'm not hungover. That's fucking awesome. Like, what can I do today to celebrate that? And then you find something little to like celebrate. Maybe that's even just like journaling and being like, that's so awesome, you know? I always talk about finding like magic in the mundane, and that's literally what I started doing since I got sober. Like, every little thing is a reason to celebrate, because being alive is a reason to celebrate. Even if you don't do anything, like, if your day isn't that great, you can still find something to be excited about and give yourself a pat on the back for, because you do deserve a pat on the back every single day. Every single day that you're sober, every single day that you're on the path that you want to be on, you deserve to give yourself a pat on the back. Again, it's that kindness, it's that showing that self-love is really key to moving forward in this, because I think that when you're getting sober, and if you're trying to get sober and you're failing, there's a lot of internal shame. There's also probably a lot of internal shame about what you're doing in the first place, right? And I think that if you guys are like me, I would wake up in the morning and shame myself for what I had done the night before. Like, oh, why did I say this to this person? They hate me. They think I'm crazy. I hate me. I think I'm crazy. And it's like, you need to step outside, get some fresh air, literally physically touch some grass and ground. And then you need to start listing off things in your life that you are so happy about. The sun is shining on my face. I can go get myself a tasty little treat from a bakery. I can listen to my favorite song. This is my favorite song in the entire world. It reminds me of this day with my best friend, and that was such a good day. Like, you need to find things that make you feel good in order to diminish that shame that you're having. So finding magical moments as you're getting sober and kind of like living from this place of like love and happiness will really support you on your journey of sobriety. There's a lot of dark feelings that come with getting sober, because you're like unpacking all this shit that you've never dealt with before, and it's going to be a lot of really heavy feelings. So you need to look for the positivity and the happiness where you can. And sometimes those things are really, really small, but I promise those little small moments, the more you find the little small moments, the easier it's going to be to pull happiness from other moments. Do you ever miss it? My whole entire life, I had really tried really hard to build up like a party girl persona. It started really young. Like, I was always throwing parties. I was always having people over my house. I was always like wanting to go out. And I like lived for it. I lived for dressing up. I lived for socializing. And I think that when I got sober, I was like, okay, well, now that I don't have drugs and alcohol, and I'm not going out, and I don't have any friends, and I don't have any interests, and I don't have any hobbies, because all of my hobbies were drugs and alcohol, who the fuck am I? And that was really painful. I felt for a while like I had no personality, and it's kind of a fun time, like I said, because we're babies again, right? We get to learn what we like and what we don't like. And that can be really interesting because, you know, I had done the whole road trip thing with my sister, and traveling had always been like something that I was very interested in, and I always did little road trips on my own. But I never in a million years would have thought that I would be living in a van and traveling all over the country all the time. This all happened because I started trying new things when I got sober. Like, I would not be here in this van right now if I did not get sober. Wouldn't have happened. Wouldn't be talking to you on this camera, because the whole reason why I got all of my accounts is because I got sober and talked about that online. I have literally nothing to thank but my sobriety, because there's no way this would have been happening without it. How do you get through events where other people are drinking and you're not? My easiest tip for this is to always have a drink in your hand. So for example, I went out last weekend to a couple clubs. I always had a drink in my hand. It was usually a seltzer. So like at the first place, it was cans of seltzer. I always, when I had a drink in my hand, would be drinking it, right? So I was like a very fast drinker. I was drinking a lot of booze. Okay. So I feel like, one, you're going to be hydrated. So I'm like always drinking seltzer, I try like not to do soda because I find that like if I have too much sugar and caffeine, that will make me feel panicky. When we go out, I always have a little mocktail, something to sip on, or even just like a bottle of water. Like if you're at somebody's house, just always have a full glass of water, always have a water bottle with you. It just really kind of like satisfies that like hand to mouth thing. Works really well for me. What's your favorite thing that you've gotten to do sober? Honestly, it's literally what I said before. I am just so grateful for the life that I had now compared to the life that I had before. And granted, this is like 4 years in the making, but I really feel like I actually have a passion and a purpose for what I do now. And I feel like it sounds so cliche, but I do feel like I was meant to go through all of the hardship of addiction and like experience all of the bad things that I experienced to get to where I am today. And I think that I probably would not be here if I hadn't experienced those things. I never wish that my life was different. Like I never wish that like I hadn't become an alcoholic. I never wish that I hadn't started doing drugs. I never even wish that I hadn't become a stripper. And I was talking to my mom about this too, because she always says, like, if I had done all these things, X, Y, and Z, to make sure that you weren't partying, like, I wish that I hadn't. And I always say to her, I had to do those things, and they weren't good things, but I had to do those things to get to where I am today. And I wouldn't trade my life for the world. I just have a lot of gratitude for everything that I have been through and everything that I have experienced, and I don't wish that away, because I think that that's viewing your past with shame. And if you carry shame through your sobriety, just like how like I don't villainize people who drink, it's like if you carry all of these negative emotions around who you are and who you were and where you've come from, that's not healthy either. You don't want to treat any version of yourself badly, like past you, present you, future you. You want to look on them with love. So like I look on past me with love, and I say like she was really struggling, she was really having a hard time, and then after I'm like, but I'm so grateful that like I grew through it and I got through it and I am where I am today, you know. And it's not like where I'm at is like the end. There's always more growth to do. I'm not a perfect person. My life is not perfect by any means. And I think that it's impossible to strive for perfection. But I think that finding gratitude for where you're at in your journey and things that you have accomplished, no matter how big or small, right? Looking for those little glimmers of magic, those little glimmers of happiness in your sobriety journey is great. You know, like, hey, I got home before midnight tonight. That's awesome. That's awesome. It's amazing. You know, like little things like that. You feel like it gets easier the longer you've been sober. So I think that you rewire your brain a little bit. And I would say the first year is so excruciating. That's like when you're the most likely to relapse. And I think it's just because your brain is so used to getting that like little hit of comfort or little quiet time. Like now I know that my brain is not going to be quieted by booze. Like booze does not exist in my world right now. Like that is not something that I would even think about reaching for now, which is crazy because for 10 years, that was like what I did every single day to just like quiet the noise. And it's crazy because the noise in your head gets so loud when you're first sober. And I think that that's why so many people relapse so quickly, because it's so difficult to even just cope with being alone, because your brain is like telling you all these crazy negative things about yourself, giving you anxiety, telling you you're not good enough. And it's just freaking out. And it takes so long to, first of all, you have to ignore it and not start drinking, because it only goes away. Like, I think it took 4 or 5 months for that anxiety to go away. Like, it took a really long time. And that's why a support network is so important, because it's going to be a long time before you're comfortable being on your own. So you're going to need to be around a lot of people that support you and are excited that you're sober and are on board with that, because without that, it's kind of just like it is a really dark time, and it is not easy. Like, it's easy now for me because, like I said, it's like rewiring your brain. Your brain is not rewired for the first year, and you're like learning all new things. You're a baby, learning what you like, finding your personality again. Who am I without drugs and alcohol? Because like that's all I care about. And it's just, you feel like you don't know yourself. And I feel like, you know, my style changed, I felt like my personality changed, my values changed drastically. And now I find that like treating people with kindness, especially yourself, this is what I learned, that like kindness goes a long way. Being kind to yourself when you're getting sober and giving yourself leeway and not judging yourself is going to get you so far. And I feel like just learning to be kind to myself really taught me that like I need to be kind to everyone all the time, because you never know what someone's going through. Like, I always talk to everyone like I wish people had talked to me when I was getting sober, because you're so fragile and you're so emotional and you're experiencing all of these emotions that you've never experienced before, that like you really need nice people in your life. And the number one person that needs to be nice in your life is you. So you have to quit the negative self-talk. And I know that that's really hard to like quiet your brain early on, but you have to learn mindfulness, and you have to learn how to like, you have to correct it. So every time you're like, oh, my life sucks and I'm never going to get sober, say something nice about yourself right now. Say something nice about yourself right now. Say something nice about yourself right now. I'll wait. Okay, perfect. Okay, the last thing I'm going to answer is, if your partner isn't sober, does it make things hard? So Cap was not sober when we were dating, and we had wine in the house, and I didn't have an issue with that. He's an artist, so he would always have a glass of wine while he was painting, and I never had an issue with that. It didn't bother me. It still doesn't bother me to go out to dinner and like everybody else splits a bottle of wine and I get a little mocktail. None of that bothers me. I think that early on it's probably hard, and I think that it would probably be really hard for me. And I mentioned this in my other YouTube video. I kind of talk about it at length, but I don't necessarily think that it would have been possible for me to date someone who was still going out and partying while I was trying to get sober. When I had done my 100 days sober, I was dating someone who was going out and partying probably 4 or 5 nights a week. And that was really hard and obviously not successful. But I was setting myself up for failure. I was working at the strip club. And I'm not saying that you can't get sober working at a strip club. Like, you definitely can. But I think that that just wasn't in the cards for me. It's a lot more difficult, I think, if you're working in a place that literally makes money off of selling alcohol, you know? So I think that if I had a partner that was drinking early on, I don't think I would have been able to do it, because, you know, to have alcohol in the house and like readily accessible for you when you're so early in on your journey, like, what is stopping you from just picking that up and being like, oh, I'll try again tomorrow, you know? So I think that it's really hard, and it's no judgment for the other party. Like, it's no judgment for your partner who's drinking. And I think that you shouldn't have that mindset. You can't judge them. Even if they have a drinking problem, you can't judge them, because that's just you judging someone else who has the same problem as you. And I think that keeping all judgment off the table for yourself and other people is like key to growth in this situation, because like all we can do is our best, right? So it's like, if you mess up and you slip up and you relapse, that's okay. We're just going to start again tomorrow, you know? And it's like, you can't beat yourself up because it happened. Like, what do you want to do? You want to like make yourself feel like shit when you already feel like shit because you're hungover? Like, that's silly. Why don't we just try again tomorrow? Like, tomorrow's a perfect day to start over. So it's just like having that feeling, and like not being like, oh, you drink, like you need to choose alcohol over me. You need to like have a conversation with this person and be like, listen, I'm not comfortable with like alcohol in the house, or like I'm not comfortable if you drink around me. And you kind of need to have that discussion as to whether or not, you know, your sobriety is super important to you, and if this relationship is important enough that that person can kind of leave the booze elsewhere, you know, so it's not in your presence, and be respectful. It's again like building that support system that respects you and respects your decision and wants to help you rather than hinder you. And I think that anyone that wants to hinder you really doesn't want what's best for your life. And that's a really hard pill to swallow, But like I said, your old life's going to cost you your new one. I do feel like whenever I share about my sobriety, like I share a lot of things that were really painful, because I think that, you know, I think that people do their most growth through pain. I think that painful situations teach us the most in life, as does love, obviously. But I think that we're able to grow more and figure out what we want from life from pain. And so getting sober was the most painful thing I've ever done in my entire life. Worst year of my life. But I would go through that tenfold to be able to experience life on the level that I do now. My friendships are not based around alcohol now. Like, everything is so much deeper than it was before. And that sounds so woo-woo, but I'm so grateful to be sober. And I still have so much love for the version of me that was a user. Like, I have great memories. I have great times. I have funny stories. You know? Do I want to be here? No. But I love her. You know? And I learned from her. So I hope that this answered some of your questions. I always love talking about my sobriety, and I always feel like talking about it more than once a year would be better for me. But drop any questions you might have. I'll try to answer them. I love you guys. If you're struggling, I see you. I hear you. I love you. I know what you're going through. You're not alone. And I'm here to support you along your journey in any way that you need. Thank you for being here while I celebrate 4 years sober. I love you guys.